Hello friends, before I start telling the stories, please like the video, leave your comment, where are you from and what time are you watching? Also subscribe to the channel, this will really help the channel grow. Thank you all. Now, get comfortable and let's start. I moved to Briar Ridge in late September, thinking it would be a quiet place to reset my life. It was one of those tiny towns you pass on the highway without even noticing. Just a gas station, a diner, a handful of houses, and a post office that probably survived only because no one bothered to shut it down. The whole place was wrapped in dense pine forest that felt too close, like the trees were leaning in to watch. My rental house sat at the edge of town. The landlord, a soft-spoken older guy named Dennis, handed me the keys in a hurry and kept glancing at the sky like he was late for something. He barely explained anything except that trash pickup was on Wednesdays and the water heater needed a few minutes to warm up. Before leaving, he paused in the front doorway, hesitated, then said one thing that stuck with me. "Just make sure your lights are off by 9:13, all of them." I laughed awkwardly, waiting for the punchline, but he was dead serious. He didn't explain, he didn't smile. He just repeated the time, 9:13, slowly as if making sure I heard it correctly. Then he left. At first I assumed it was some kind of weird power-saving tradition or maybe an old town quirk they held onto for nostalgia. Small towns have strange habits, and I didn't want to look like the outsider who judged everything. I shrugged it off. For the first few days everything was fine. Briar Ridge was quiet, almost unnervingly so. People were polite but distant, like they were all keeping the same secret, but didn't want to be the one to slip up and tell me. Every store closed early. Streets emptied out before dusk. By 8:30 each night, it felt like I was the last person awake in town. I didn't notice the lights thing until my fourth night there. I was unpacking boxes when I heard a sound outside, a dull thud, like something heavy hitting the sidewalk. I ignored it at first, but then it happened again and again. I peeked through the blinds and noticed something strange. The entire street was completely dark. Not just houses, the town, everything. Streetlights, windows, porch lights, even the gas station sign that usually glowed all night. It was all off, like someone pulled the plug on the entire town. I checked the clock. It was 9:17. The only light I saw was my own porch light, shining like a spotlight in a sea of black. Not a single other house had lights on. No movement, no people, just darkness. A chill ran through me. I turned off my porch light immediately, then the living room lamp, and waited near the window. Maybe it was some power-saving tradition. Maybe people were early sleepers. Maybe I was overthinking it. But the next night I paid attention. At exactly 9:13 p.m., like someone hit a switch, every light in town blinked off at the same time. Every single one. Mine stayed on, of course. I was watching the clock, so I hadn't turned them off yet. And in that 4-second window of me realizing I was the only house still glowing, something happened that made my stomach drop. I saw movement in the dark, not human movement. Something glided across the street, too smooth, too silent. Another shape drifted between two houses, tall and thin, like a shadow peeled off the side of a building. They weren't walking, they were sliding. There were at least 3 of them. I shut my lights off so fast I knocked over the lamp. For a second, everything inside the house was pitch black. I held my breath. The shadows outside had stopped moving. I don't know how I could tell, but I swear it felt like they were looking directly at my house. After what felt like hours, vanishing behind the tree line, like smoke dissolving into the air. Sleep didn't come easy that night. The next morning, I walked to the diner for breakfast. The waitress, a middle-aged woman who looked like she'd smoked enough cigarettes to embalm her lungs, poured my coffee and asked how I was settling in. I told her the town was quiet. Then I asked the question, "So, what's with lights out at 9:13? She froze mid-pour. The stream of coffee overflowed the edge of my cup, but she didn't seem to notice. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "You should follow the rest of us." That doesn't answer the question. That is the answer. When I pushed further, she shook her head and walked away. No one else in the diner made eye contact with me for the rest of the morning. That night, I turned the lights off early, locked my doors, and sat quietly in the living room. At 9:12, I felt something. A pressure in the air, like the atmosphere had suddenly thickened. The forest beyond my yard turned darker than night should naturally be. Even the moonlight seemed smothered. At 9:13, the town dimmed in unison. This time, I didn't look outside. I closed the curtains and tried to read to distract myself, but it didn't help because a few minutes later, I heard it. Someone was standing on my porch. Their steps were slow, deliberate, like they were studying the boards beneath their feet. Then came a long, dragging sound, as if something was sliding its hand or claws across my door. I sat frozen, gripping the arms of the chair. Then the porch light switch clicked. I hadn't left it on. Another click, like something was flipping the switch up and down, testing it, and then a gentle tap on the window, just once. Then again, then a third time in a slow pattern, like knocking but with no rhythm, no intention except to see if I'd react. I didn't move. After 5 minutes, the tapping stopped. The porch steps creaked. Whatever it was slid off into the dark. I didn't sleep at all. The next day, I decided I couldn't live like this. I packed a few essentials and drove to the gas station to ask the attendant if there were any nearby hotels. He stared at me like I'd announced I had 2 weeks to live. Thinking of staying out of town tonight? Yeah. He leaned in slowly, lowering his voice. Don't do that. Why not? You're safer here than out on the road after dark. They roam farther when the lights go out. Who's they? He swallowed hard and shook his head. Just be home by 9 and cut the lights. That was all he'd say. I stood in my car for a long time afterward, just staring at the road. Part of me wanted to leave right then and there, drive until the gas tank hit empty, and abandon this nightmare. But another part, the part that kept replaying those shadows gliding across my yard, told me the truth. If they could roam, then darkness followed them wherever they went. And I'd be out there alone, so I stayed. That night, I turned everything off early again. And again, at 9:13, the pressure settled over the town. But this time, something else happened. My phone buzzed, unknown number, just one message. Why are your curtains closed tonight? My blood ran cold. Someone or something was watching the house closely enough to notice the difference. I didn't respond. Another message came 10 seconds later. We liked it better when you looked. The phone slipped from my hands. My breathing turned shaky. Whoever or whatever was texting me had been outside on the nights I peeked through the window. I didn't sleep that night either. The next morning, I went straight to Dennis's house. I told him everything, the shadows, the tapping, the messages. He didn't act surprised. Instead, he asked quietly, "Did you ever leave a light on past 9:13? No, I turned them off both nights. Then you're fine, he said. They're curious about newcomers. That's all. Curiosity fades. What are they? Don't ask that. Just live like the rest of us. Routine keeps you safe. I left, more confused than before. That evening felt wrong the moment the sun went down. The air felt thicker. The woods felt closer. Even the crickets were silent. I waited in the dark until 9:13, then shut everything down. But this time, something felt different. At 9:16, the tapping started again. Not on the window this time, on the back door. Slow, rhythmic taps. Then, from the front porch, a second tapping. 2 sides of the house at once. Then a third. From the side window, they were surrounding me. I backed away slowly, staying as silent as possible. The tapping grew more impatient, more deliberate, like they knew I was awake, like they were waiting for me to slip up and turn on a light or make a sound. And then from outside, I heard a voice. It sounded like me. "Hey, you left your porch light on again." I hadn't. The switch was off, the power was off. But the voice outside said it again, this time with a slight echo, like it was trying to shape itself into a human tone. "Come turn it off." My own voice. I pressed my back against the wall, trembling so hard my teeth chattered. The tapping stopped. All 3 sides of the house went silent. Then something pressed slowly against the front door, not knocking, just leaning, testing the door frame, testing the strength of the lock. I held my breath until my chest burned. Minutes crawled by. Finally, the pressure on the door eased. The porch creaked. The footsteps slid off into the distance. The rest of the night stayed silent. I didn't last long after that. 2 days later, I packed everything I could fit into my car and drove out before sunrise. I didn't care what the gas station attendant said. I didn't care what Dennis warned. I just needed to be gone. The farther I drove from Briar Ridge, the lighter the air felt. By the time I hit the highway, the sky finally looked normal again. I didn't look in the rearview mirror at all that morning. I didn't want to see anything following the car. I moved across the state. New job, new apartment, different life. But sometimes at night, when everything's quiet, my phone buzzes from an unknown number. The last message I ever opened said, "We still liked it better when you left the lights on." I moved to the small town of Elk Harbor for a cheap rental and a quiet place to finish my work-from-home contract. It wasn't on any major maps, just a faded dot on the highway lined with old houses, a diner, a hardware store, and an antique shop that looked like it hadn't made a sale since the 1970s. It was the kind of place where people sat on porches all day and waved whether they knew you or not. My rental house was on a road called Pine Orchard Lane. Nothing special, cracked pavement, leaning mailboxes, a forest pressing in on both sides. But the map I downloaded before moving showed another street branching off Pine Orchard, Briar Avenue. It curved about a quarter mile into the woods and connected to an abandoned church. The street was drawn so clearly that I assumed it existed. The weird part, when I arrived, there was no Briar Avenue, not even a dirt path, just an empty stretch of trees where the road should have been. I didn't think much of it at first. Small towns change, roads get closed, Google Maps screws up sometimes. But curiosity got me. My landlord, a quiet man named Walter, was handing over the house keys when I asked him about it casually. "So where's Briar Avenue? I can't seem to find it." His expression froze just long enough to be noticeable. Then he forced a smile. "Oh, Briar, it's still there. Just hard to see. It's right where the map says." "No, I looked. There's no road." "It's there," he repeated, more firmly this time. "Has always been there." I didn't push, but the way he stared at me made my stomach feel like ice. The next day I tried again. I walked down Pine Orchard Lane and stopped at the spot the map said Briar Avenue should be. I even marked it on my GPS. Coordinates lined up perfectly. Yet there was no sign of a road ever being paved there. No clearing, no posts, no worn-down gravel trail. Nothing except thick underbrush and trees packed too tightly for any car to squeeze between. When I walked back, one of the neighbors was sweeping her porch. An older woman named Karen, who'd introduced herself the day before. I asked her about it. I didn't even finish the question. Her broom clattered to the floor, and she pointed straight at me with a shaking finger. "Don't ask about Briar Avenue," she snapped. "It's still there. Everyone uses it." I looked back at the empty forest. "Use what? There's nothing." "It's there," she insisted through clenched teeth. "Don't ask again." She went inside and slammed the door. That was my second red flag. The third came that night. I couldn't sleep, so I stepped outside around midnight for air. From my yard, I could see the spot where the missing street should have been. The forest was pitch black. Then I saw headlights, not on Pine Orchard Lane, in the trees. Two bright beams moved slowly through the woods, drifting between the trunks like a car was driving on an invisible road. But there was no sound, no engine, no gravel crunching, no movement of branches, just the lights gliding eerily, parallel to the ground. They stopped suddenly, pointing directly at me. Then they snapped off. I backed into the house and locked the door immediately. The next morning I told myself I imagined it, sleep deprivation or something. But something felt wrong. The air felt heavier. People on the street wouldn't meet my eyes. At noon, while walking to the diner, I passed a man sitting on a bench. He stared at me intensely and said without any greeting, "You saw it, didn't you?" "Saw what?" "Briar." His voice cracked. "They looked at you. Now you need to stop looking back." Before I could ask anything else, he got up and walked quickly into an alley like he'd said too much. That night, I decided I needed proof. I stood by the forest edge at 9 p.m. with my phone ready to record. At 11:47, the lights returned. Two white beams gliding perfectly straight through the pitch-black woods. No noise, no shadows cast, just lights existing where they shouldn't. I started recording, stepping closer to the trees. And that's when I finally heard something. A quiet, rhythmic tapping. It wasn't coming from the lights. It was coming from the ground, like something metallic or sharp was pacing back and forth. Then a second set of lights flickered to life behind the first pair. Then a third pair. 6 headlights total. glowing between tightly packed trees. My phone vibrated suddenly in my hand. A text from an unknown number. Do not cross. Stay on your side. I froze. My heart thudded so loudly I swear the trees could hear it. Another message arrived. Briar is not for you. I backed away, never taking my eyes off the lights. They didn't move. They just hovered in place like someone, or something, was waiting for me to get closer. When I returned inside and reviewed the video, my stomach dropped. The lights weren't visible in the recording, only the dark forest. But the audio picked up something chilling. Faint breathing directly beside the phone's microphone, even though I was completely alone outside. I barely slept. The next morning, I demanded answers from Walter. I told him everything. The lights, the texts, the missing road, the neighbors acting like I was crazy. He shut the door behind him and whispered in a tense, warning tone, "You need to stop asking. Briar Avenue is there for the people who belong to the town. Outsiders aren't supposed to see it unless something's wrong." Wrong like what? Like someone on Briar leaving their side. I didn't know what that meant, but the way he said it, like reciting a warning he'd known his whole life, made my skin crawl. That night, I decided I wouldn't go outside. I kept my lights dim, curtains drawn, and tried to distract myself with work. But around midnight, I heard something familiar. That slow, rhythmic tapping, coming from my backyard this time. I forced myself to look through the blinds, and I saw a silhouette standing at the edge of the trees. Not close enough to see details, just tall, thin, completely still. It wasn't one of my neighbors. Then something whispered my name from the dark. I didn't stay by the window. I crouched behind the couch and held my breath. The tapping circled the house slowly, like something was tracing the walls. Eventually it stopped. At 3:12 a.m. I got another text. "Briar is open tonight. Do not answer them." That them told me everything I needed to know. Whatever was watching me wasn't human. At least not anymore. By sunrise, I'd packed my car. I didn't tell Walter or Karen or anyone else. I just left. No destination, just away. But the worst part happened an hour outside town. I stopped at a gas station to calm myself. When I opened my GPS to check directions, my blood ran ice cold. Briar Avenue was on the map again, but it wasn't in Elk Harbor anymore. It was drawn directly over the road I was currently driving on, like Briar had followed me. At that exact moment, my phone buzzed. Unknown, you can't leave the street if you've seen it. The woods beside the gas station grew darker, even though it was morning, and in that shadow, partially hidden behind a tree, 2 dim headlights flickered on. Watching. Waiting. I drove west until the entire state was behind me. I crossed into another one without stopping. For now, Briar hasn't appeared on my map again. But sometimes, on long stretches of empty highway, I catch glimpses of faint lights drifting between the trees, keeping perfect pace with my car, sometimes tapping quietly against the road. And every time I hear that sound, I know exactly what it means. Even if I don't see the street anymore, the street still sees me. When I moved to Willow Creek, I was looking for peace and quiet. My old city apartment sat next to a bar that never shut up, and after a year of living there, I'd convinced myself that a small town would fix everything. Cheaper rent, slower life, fresh air. Willow Creek seemed perfect. Quaint houses, a rundown library, a general store that smelled like old wood and cinnamon. The kind of place where people waved when they drove past. My rental house was right near Main Street, close enough to walk to the shops, but far enough back that cars rarely passed. My landlord, a woman named Marnie, lived next door in a house that looked like it belonged in a 1950s postcard. She handed me the keys, gave me a quick tour, and warned me that the town got real quiet after dark. At the time, I thought she meant people went to bed early. She didn't. My third night in town, I woke up around 1 a.m. to music. Faint at first, like a distant radio, but slowly growing louder. I rolled out of bed, annoyed, thinking someone was having a late-night party. When I stepped onto my porch, the sound became clearer. It wasn't party music. It was marching. Drums, brass instruments, a steady rhythm, like a high school marching band playing far away but approaching. The weird part was there were no high schools in Willow Creek. The closest one was 20 minutes outside town. I walked down my porch steps and listened. The music was drifting from Main Street, getting closer, slow, steady, but unmistakably a parade. At 1 a.m., I thought maybe it was a rehearsal, or a recording, or something harmless. But curiosity got the better of me, so I walked quietly toward the sound. When I reached the end of my street, I saw it. A parade was moving down Main Street. Hundreds of people in uniforms marched in rows, men, women, even children. Their clothes didn't match anything modern. They looked old-fashioned, like 1920s fairground performers mixed with faded military outfits. Some carried flags whose symbols I didn't recognize. Others carried lanterns that flickered without any flame. Everyone moved in perfect rhythm. No one spoke. Not a single head turned. They drifted down the street like they were gliding instead of walking. I pulled out my phone to record, but when I opened the camera, the screen glitched, static, distortion, colors swirling. I tried snapping a photo anyway, but the shutter lagged, then froze completely. My phone wouldn't respond. Then someone in the parade turned their head toward me. Just one person at first. A tall man near the center of the march, carrying what looked like an old snare drum strapped across his chest. His head twisted unnaturally far to look at me without breaking his stride. His eyes were wide, like polished glass reflecting streetlights that weren't on. Then another marcher turned, then another. Within seconds, dozens of pale faces were all staring at me, while their bodies still marched forward in perfect sync. I backed away without making a sound. Their faces didn't change expression. Their eyes never blinked. They just watched me as they passed, row after row, until the last lantern carrier drifted down the street and out of sight. The music faded with them. By the time I got home, the night was dead silent again. I barely slept. The next morning, I went to the general store and asked the owner, a guy named Randy, if the town did some kind of late-night parade tradition. He didn't even look at me when he said, "You shouldn't be out on Main Street after midnight." That doesn't answer my question. You don't want the answer. I pushed again, but he just shook his head and refused to talk more. That was the first moment I truly felt something was wrong with Willow Creek. The second came later that afternoon. My landlord, Marnie, knocked on my door with a basket of homemade cookies. She smiled politely, but her eyes darted around like she was checking to see if anyone else was nearby. "You didn't go out last night, did you?" she asked, voice low. I hesitated. "Why?" "Just, will you promise me something?" "What?" "If you hear anything at night, music, voices, footsteps, stay inside, curtains closed, lights off." "Why? Who are they?" Her face fell. "Don't call them who, just don't join them." That's all. Before I could ask anything else, she hurried back to her house. That night, I stayed inside like she said. Around 1:04 a.m., the parade passed again. I heard the drums, the brass, the marching feet. This time I kept the lights off, crouched in my living room, peeking through a crack in the curtains. They marched with the same perfect rhythm, same uniforms, same expressionless faces. But this time, something was different. They left footprints. Not normal footprints, dark ones like wet ash or mud, but when I checked the street the next morning, they were gone completely, not even a trace. The third night, I planned to stay up and record the sound at least. I set up an audio app on my phone and waited. At 12:56, the music started. In my backyard, not on Main Street. I froze. The drums were faint, but growing clearer. The brass echoed through the trees behind my house. Whatever this parade was, it had changed direction. I turned off every light and crawled to the back window. Between the trees, I saw faint lanterns weaving through the dark, moving toward my yard. Then a figure stepped into the grass, a woman, pale, wearing a long, faded uniform. She held a cracked lantern in one hand and a tattered banner in the other. Her eyes were blank, almost milky. She wasn't looking at me, but looking around my yard like she was searching for something. Then another marcher's face appeared beside her, then another. The parade was drifting around my house, marching silently through the grass, circling. A soft tapping started on my front porch, slow, insistent, like someone running their fingers down the wood. I didn't breathe. My phone buzzed in my pocket, a text from an unknown number. "If you answer the door, they'll think you're joining." Another text followed, "Don't join." I stayed still for nearly an hour, listening to the muffled marching and the scraping lanterns brushing against my windows. Eventually, the sounds drifted away. The music faded. The lantern glow disappeared into the trees. I barely slept after that. Every sound felt like footsteps returning. The next morning, I went to ask Marnie about it, but she didn't answer her door. It wasn't locked, but opening it felt wrong. Her blinds were closed. Her car was in the driveway, but something felt off. Randy from the general store told me she went somewhere for a few days. His tone made it clear I shouldn't ask where. I didn't expect the next part. 2 nights later, the parade didn't just march through town. They came right up to my front door. The drums pounded hard enough to rattle the windows. Lantern light flickered through every gap in the curtains, and a soft, rhythmic chant rose under the music, hundreds of voices whispering something I couldn't understand. Then the doorknob turned, not aggressively, just slow, testing, trying to see if I'd unlocked it. I held my breath and backed away quietly. A pale hand slid across the window glass, leaving no fingerprints, only a faint smear of darkness that faded moments later. They didn't speak, they didn't knock, they just waited. Then someone finally whispered through the door. Not a stranger, me, my own voice, calm, soft. "Come outside. You belong in the parade tonight." I nearly screamed. The voice repeated, perfectly mimicking my tone, "Come outside." I grabbed a kitchen knife, not because it would help, but because it made me feel less helpless, and backed into the farthest room. The whispering outside grew louder, more voices, more variations of my own voice calling me. Around 3 a.m., it stopped. Silence washed over the house. No footsteps, no drums, no voices. They were gone. The next morning I left Willow Creek. I didn't pack much, just enough to fit into my car. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't look back. But a week after moving to a new city, something happened that made my blood run cold. I was walking home around sunset when I saw something under a streetlight. A footprint. Not normal. A dark, ashy print shaped exactly like the ones I'd seen outside my window. And when I checked my phone that night, I had one unread message from an unknown number. "Parades don't stay in one town." Followed by, "We march everywhere." And the last one, "You already joined." Every night since, I swear I hear faint music drifting through the distance. Drums, brass, and my own voice calling from somewhere just out of sight. I moved to the small town of Hollow Pines for one reason: quiet. That's what everyone said it was known for. A quiet place to retire, to raise a family, or in my case, to get away from the noise of the city after a rough breakup. The town wasn't big, maybe a few hundred people, a main street with a diner, a hardware store, and a bar everyone pretended they didn't visit. Classic small town stuff. But the most noticeable thing in Hollow Pines was the church. It sat on a hill just on the edge of town, overlooking everything. Old stone walls, a tall steeple, and a massive bronze bell that looked ancient. The church didn't hold regular services anymore. The only time I ever saw anyone there was funerals. It wasn't abandoned, just unused, like it was waiting for something. My landlord, a guy named Mark, gave me the usual small-town rules. Trash pickup on Mondays, keep noise down after 10, don't feed the raccoons. But before he left, he added something strange. If the bell rings at night, he said, don't go outside, don't look toward the church, and don't answer your phone if it rings. I laughed, thinking he was joking. He wasn't. He didn't even crack a smile. The first 2 weeks were peaceful. I mostly kept to myself, freelanced online, went into town when I needed groceries, talked to a few neighbors. Nothing weird. Until the bell rang. It was a Wednesday night, 2:14 a.m. The sound yanked me out of sleep so violently that for a moment I thought it was a fire alarm. The bell was deep, heavy, echoing across the valley in slow, long intervals. It didn't sound like church bells ringing for service or celebration. It sounded like mourning. But what made my skin crawl was how long each toll lasted. Like someone was forcing the bell to swing harder than it should. I got out of bed, walked to the window, and reached for the curtains, then stopped. Mark's warning flashed through my mind. Don't look toward the church. I backed away. The bell rang 7 times. Then the sound stopped. I checked the town's Facebook page in the morning, thinking maybe someone had passed away. Small towns usually post something immediately. But there was nothing. At the diner, I asked around casually, "Hey, did anyone else hear the church bell last night?" Forks stopped scraping plates. Heads lifted. Everyone stared at me with that look people get when you mention something you weren't supposed to know about. Finally, the waitress leaned in and whispered, "Whose name did you hear with it?" "What? You didn't hear a name?" "No. Should I have?" She paled and backed away. You heard it wrong then. But I knew I hadn't heard anything wrong. The bell was clear as day, no voice, no whisper, nothing except the tolling. I left confused. 3 nights later, the bell rang again. This time at 1:06 a.m. I jolted awake, heart racing. Remembering Mark's warning, I stayed away from the window. But halfway through the 3rd toll, something happened that shook me. A voice whispered through my bedroom, clear, hoarse, right behind my ear. Evan, my name. I spun around, but no one was there. The air was cold enough that I could see my breath. The house didn't have drafts, the windows were closed, yet the temperature felt like I'd stepped into a freezer. The bell tolled again. Evan? The whisper was louder this time, echoing faintly like someone calling from inside the walls. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. Unknown number. I didn't answer. A text came through instead. We're sorry. The bell wasn't meant for you yet. I almost threw my phone across the room. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. The next morning, I marched straight to Mark's house. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. You heard it, didn't you? He asked before I even said anything. Yes, I said. What the hell is going on? Why is the bell ringing at all? And why did someone whisper my name? He shut the door behind me, lowered his voice, and told me the truth, or at least part of it. The bell rings when someone in town is about to die, he said. Everyone here knows that. But it doesn't ring for the dead. It rings for the living. It's a warning. What about the voice? He looked down. When the bell calls your name, it means something's gotten too close. It means death isn't waiting. It's coming. That's insane. It doesn't happen often, only when someone new moves in. Something wakes up, looking for the wrong name. Wrong name? The bell chooses, but sometimes something else calls first. His hands were shaking as he said it. I left feeling even more confused. That night, I checked into a motel 20 minutes outside town. I didn't care if I lost my deposit, I just wanted to sleep. But at 2:14 a.m., I woke to a sound that made my heart drop into my stomach. The motel room phone was ringing. An old rotary phone, not the digital one on the nightstand. It shouldn't have even been connected. I didn't answer, but the phone didn't stop. It rang again and again. After the 7th ring, it clicked like someone had picked up on the other end. Then I heard breathing. Slow, deep breathing, followed by the same voice from my bedroom. Evan. I hung up the motel phone, grabbed my keys, and drove back to Hollow Pines. I didn't know what else to do. Running made it worse. Leaving didn't help. The bell rang the moment I reached town limits. One deep toll, then another, like it knew I was back. I floored it to my house, slammed the door shut, and curled up in the living room with every light on. I knew I shouldn't look at the church, but the urge to check was overwhelming. Around 3 a.m., I finally cracked the blinds open just an inch. The church steeple was barely visible through the fog, but something was standing beneath it. A tall, thin silhouette, not moving, just staring in the direction of my house. The next morning, Mark showed up at my door with a list of names, town residents. Half of them had check marks next to them. The other half had dates next to them, dates of death. Except some of the people with dates were still alive. What is this? I asked. He looked defeated. The bell rings twice, he said. Once for the truth, once for the mistake. What mistake? When it calls the wrong person. My stomach twisted. I was the mistake? We hope so, he whispered. Hope, not certainty. That night, the bell rang again. But this time the voice didn't whisper from behind me. It whispered from the hallway, then the kitchen, then right outside my bedroom door. Footsteps creaked across the floorboards, slow, deliberate, like someone was pacing my house in the dark. Evan! I held my breath so long my vision blurred. Then the footsteps stopped. Silence. After a moment, my phone lit up with a new text. Listen carefully. If you hear the bell again tonight, don't move, not even to breathe. I waited. For minutes. For hours. Around 4:11 a.m., the bell rang once more. Deeper than ever. So loud that the glass in my windows trembled. And the next whisper wasn't behind me. It was inside my ear. As if someone was leaning in close enough for their lips to brush my skin. Evan, I stayed completely still, not breathing, not blinking, not moving. Footsteps approached my bed, stopped beside me. Then something exhaled slowly, like warm, decaying breath drifting across my neck. Seconds passed like hours, then the sound faded. When sunlight finally came, I packed everything and left Hollow Pines permanently. I didn't care where I ended up, I just needed distance. I haven't heard the bell since. But last week I got a call from an unknown number. When I answered, there was no whisper, just a bell tolling slowly, 7 times. And then the voice, calm and certain, this time we didn't ring for the wrong person. I ended the call, but the ringing in my ears hasn't stopped since. When I first moved to the little town of Miller's Rest, I didn't expect anything strange. It was a quiet dot on the map with 2 diners, a rundown library, and 1 gas station that looked like it hadn't been updated since the early 80s. I was renting a small cabin outside town while working remote for a year. Cheap, peaceful, private, all the things I thought I wanted. The first weird thing I noticed was the gas station attendant. The station sat right at the edge of town. A faded sign hung above the pumps, half the bulbs burned out. The moment I pulled in on my first day, I felt like I'd stepped into a place time forgot. The attendant walked out with a smile. He looked 17. Not 17 in the way teenagers sometimes look older. I mean exactly 17, like he stepped straight out of a high school yearbook. Skinny frame, brown hair falling into his eyes, freckles, the same uniform everyone in town seemed to wear at some point. A blue jacket with the station's logo stitched on. His name tag said, Jason. He filled my tank, wiped my windshield, and asked if I was new in Miller's. He talked like a kid too. Polite but nervous. Friendly but awkward. I asked him how long he'd worked there. Long time, he said. How long? He shrugged. Since I was about 17. I smiled. How old are you now? He smiled back, but not in a natural way. More like he was practicing what he thought a smile should look like. 17. Then he walked back inside. The encounter stuck with me, but I brushed it off as small-town weirdness. Maybe he was just joking. Maybe he really was a kid, and I was overthinking it. I wasn't. The second time I went, he said the exact same thing to me. New in Miller's? He didn't remember me at all. Same tone, same cadence, same question. That's when I looked closer. His clothes were spotless. Yes, no wrinkles, no stains, no oil smudges, even though he pumped gas all day. His hair never seemed to move, not in the wind, not when he nodded. His skin didn't have a single blemish except the exact same freckles as before. He wasn't just 17, he was identical. Every time. The third time I went, he greeted me the same way again, new in Miller's, even though we'd talked twice before. But something else happened that time, something subtle. When I handed him my card, his fingers were cold. Not cold like someone who'd been outside, cold like metal left in the freezer. I pulled away slowly, trying not to react, and pretended to check something in the car. He didn't seem to notice. That night, I decided to ask a local about him. At the diner, I mentioned the gas station attendant to the waitress, a middle-aged woman named Annie. She was refilling my coffee when I said, "So, the kid at the gas station, Jason, how old is he?" Her hand jerked, spilling the coffee across the table. Then she froze, her face drained of color. She stared at me for a few seconds like I had said something people weren't supposed to say. Without a word, she walked away. The rest of the diners avoided eye contact. The next time I visited the station, about a week later, things got worse. I pulled up to the pump around dusk. Jason walked out immediately, same forced smile. New in Miller's? I ignored the question and said, "How's your week been?" He blinked, twice, slowly, like he didn't understand the question. "I've been here," he said. "Every day? Yes. You don't take days off?" "No. Why not?" He looked past me toward the woods across the road and said, "I don't leave the station. Ever?" He didn't answer. I decided to push it. "You're 17, right?" He nodded. "When's your birthday?" He hesitated, then said quietly, "October 12th. It was October 12th. "Today's your birthday?" I asked. He blinked again. "Yes. How old are you today?" He paused, almost too long. 17. I drove home with goosebumps crawling across my arms. That night, I woke up around 3:15 a.m. My phone was vibrating with a message from an unknown number. It said, "Don't stop for gas after dark." I didn't recognize the number, but the area code matched Miller's Rest. A minute later, I received a second message, "And don't talk to him anymore." I tried calling the number back. It was immediately disconnected. The next day, I walked to the library and asked the librarian if she knew anything about the gas station attendant. She smiled politely until I mentioned him by name. Then her eyes went wide. Her voice trembled. "Please don't ask about Jason," she said. "It's safer not to think about him." "Why?" She shook her head. "I'm sorry. I can't. I really can't." She left her desk and didn't return for the rest of the day. People weren't just avoiding talking about him. They were scared. That evening, curiosity got the better of me. I drove back to the station, not to buy anything, but to watch from a distance. I parked across the road near the woods. Jason was inside the booth, staring at the wall. Not moving, not working, just staring. At 9:13 p.m., the lights inside the station flickered. Jason didn't look up. At 9:14, the lights flickered again. He turned his head slowly toward the door, then toward the woods, directly at me. I ducked out of sight. From behind the tree line, I watched him step outside slowly. His movements weren't normal, too stiff, too smooth, like joints bending only because they were programmed to. He walked to the edge of the lot, stopping inches from the darkness of the forest. Then he spoke, not toward the sky or the ground, toward the woods. "I'm still here," he said softly, "just like every night." There was no response, just silence. Jason turned toward the station again, but not before something moved between the trees behind him. A shape, tall, thin, almost skeletal, watching him, watching me. I held my breath until my chest hurt. Jason walked back inside the station and closed the door. I left quickly. The next day, I confronted someone who couldn't easily run from the conversation. My landlord, Tom. I asked him directly about the gas station attendant. He looked exhausted, defeated, like he'd been waiting for me to bring it up. "First rule in Miller's Rest," he said quietly. "You don't ask about Jason. I already did. Then you need to leave." "Why?" He rubbed his face with shaking hands. "Because once you notice he doesn't age, once you realize he repeats the same words, the same movements, the same lines, he notices you back." "What is he?" Tom's eyes filled with fear. "He wasn't always like that," he said. "A long time ago, 40 years back, Jason was just a kid who worked the pumps after school. Nice kid, helpful, quiet." "What happened to him?" Tom's jaw clenched. "He died." I felt ice water fill my veins. "Then what?" "The town needed the station," he said. "Needed someone there. Needed routine. Needed him." "What does that mean?" Tom looked toward the window. "He came back wrong. That night, I locked every door and kept the lights off. Around 2 a.m., I heard a car in my driveway, a slow engine hum. Someone stepped out. Gravel crunched. Footsteps approached my porch. I peeked through the blinds as quietly as I could. Jason was standing there, still wearing the same spotless blue jacket, still looking 17. His head tilted slightly, like he was listening. Then he whispered, "I don't leave the station." A pause. Then softer. "But tonight is different." My phone buzzed on the table. A text from that same unknown number. "He's not supposed to be there. Don't make a sound." Jason stepped closer. He lifted his hand and pressed it gently against my front door, like he was testing the temperature. "It's cold," he whispered. A long silence followed. Then he lowered his head until it rested against the door. "I don't want to be alone tonight." My body tensed. Every instinct was screaming to run, but I stayed completely still. After what felt like an eternity, Jason stepped back, walked slowly to his car, and drove away. The next morning, I packed immediately. Before I left, I stopped at the gas station one last time. Jason was already there, standing at the pump, smiling as if nothing had happened. "New in Miller's?" he asked. I didn't answer. As I pulled away, I saw something in the rearview mirror that froze my blood. Standing in the woods behind the station was the tall, thin figure I'd seen before, watching him, watching me. And behind that figure stood row after row of shadows, all facing the station, like they were keeping him there. Like they were waiting for something. I drove until I crossed 3 state lines. But the night after I settled into a hotel, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. One message. "He turned 17 again today." Followed by, "And he remembers you now." When I moved to the small town of Redfield, I expected boredom, not fear. It was the kind of place where people still said evening when they passed you on the sidewalk, and where the weekly newspaper was mostly about bake sales and lost pets. My rental house was cheap, quiet, and close to the only grocery store in town, Redfield Market. I went there at least 3 times a week. It was small, but clean, with only 7 aisles and 1 checkout counter. usually manned by the same tired-looking cashier named Stuart. The place always smelled faintly like lemon cleaner and old produce. Nothing out of the ordinary, until the night the aisle appeared. It was a Tuesday, around 9 p.m. I'd gone in to buy ice cream and bread. The store was almost empty, just me and a middle-aged woman comparing cereal brands. I grabbed what I needed and headed toward the registers. Then my phone buzzed with an email from work. I stepped out of the way, moved back into the aisles to answer it, and typed for maybe 2 minutes. When I looked up, the woman was gone. And so was Stuart. The lights hummed overhead, but the store felt hollow, like the air had shifted. I grabbed my basket and walked toward the front. But when I turned the corner, something didn't look right. Between aisle 4 and aisle 5, where the cleaning supplies normally were, there was another aisle, a new one. The aisle wasn't wider or brighter than the others, but the overhead sign was blank, completely blank. No label, no number, just a white rectangle. I stared at it, confused. There had always been 7 aisles. Even the printed store map near the entrance confirmed it. But this was an 8th aisle wedged perfectly in the middle like it belonged there. I looked around. The store was silent, too silent. Curiosity got the better of me. I stepped into the aisle. The shelves were stocked, but not with normal items. No brands, no labels, just plain packages. White cans, brown boxes, glass jars filled with dark liquid. Each item had a handwritten tag tied to it with string. The tags didn't say food names. They said things like, "Do not look outside. Turn off the lights before it moves. If you hear breathing, leave the store. Do not acknowledge the tall one." I picked up a small jar filled with something thick and black. The tag attached to it read, "This is not for you." A shiver ran up my spine. Something about the aisle felt wrong. Not dangerous yet, just wrong, like it wasn't meant to exist where people could walk into it. I put the jar down. The moment I did, the overhead lights flickered. Just once, but enough to make my heart rate spike. I stepped back toward aisle 4, trying to leave, but when I turned around, the blank aisle was suddenly longer. Much longer. I could see the far end stretching toward the back wall of the store, but it looked farther than the store's dimensions allowed, like the shelves expanded in the blink of an eye. Then I heard something. A soft shuffle of footsteps at the far end of the aisle, slow, dragging. Someone was there. I froze, peering down the long stretch. I couldn't see anyone, but I heard breathing. Deep, heavy, wet. I turned and stepped out of the aisle without running, forcing myself to breathe slowly. When I reached the front of the store, Stuart appeared behind the counter like he'd been standing there the whole time. He looked at my basket and said, "Find everything okay?" in the most casual tone possible. My voice almost cracked. "How many aisles are there?" He looked confused. 7. "No, there's another one." He stared at me for a long time, then lowered his voice. "Don't go down aisle 8. "So you know about it?" He shook his head quickly, eyes darting toward the store's security mirror. "I didn't say that," he whispered. "Just don't go there again." That was the first warning. Over the next week, I avoided the store at night, but one evening around 7:30, I went in during peak hours. Families shopping, kids crying, carts squeaking, normal. I grabbed a basket, 7 aisles. I exhaled in relief. But as soon as the last family left and the store grew quieter, I heard it. A creaking sound. Coming from between aisles 4 and 5, I turned slowly. Aisle 8 was there again, fully formed. Blank sign, handwritten tags, white packages. A man in a gray hoodie walked past me and into the aisle like it was normal. He disappeared behind the shelves. I waited for him to come out. He didn't. Nobody noticed. Not a single shopper reacted. After a few minutes, I walked to the front and whispered to Stuart again. "That aisle, the one that shows up sometimes. People go in and don't come out." He paled. "Don't look for them." "But leave it alone," he said, trembling slightly. "Please." I wanted to listen. I really did. But 2 nights later, the aisle appeared again. This time, the store was completely empty, except for me. I heard the shuffle again, the same slow dragging from the first night. Something was at the far end, something moving between the shelves. Against my better judgment, I stepped closer. Not inside, just close enough to see more clearly. And I saw a figure at the end of the aisle. Tall, thin, too thin, like a silhouette made of sticks. Its arms dangled down past its knees. Its head nearly touched the overhead lights. And its face, it didn't have one. just a smooth surface, like someone had placed skin where features should be. It stood completely still, facing my direction, though I couldn't tell if it saw me. Then it took a step forward, a long step, then another. The aisle stretched behind it like it was melting into darkness. I backed away slowly, heart racing, and ducked into aisle 3, breathing hard. The lights flickered again, this time longer. When they came back on, the blank aisle was gone. But something else had happened. Every handwritten tag in the store, the canned goods, cleaning supplies, snacks, had been replaced with new ones. Every single product label read, "We saw you." I dropped everything and ran out of the store. The next morning, I went back, this time in daylight, and all the shelves were normal again. Labels returned, tags gone. Stuart looked exhausted. "You shouldn't come here anymore," he said quietly. "Why is that aisle even there?" I whispered. He looked over his shoulder, then leaned in. "It wasn't always an aisle." "What was it?" He swallowed hard. "A doorway." "To what?" "To whatever this town used to worship." That night, I heard something outside my house, a shuffle on the porch, a scrape against the window. When I peeked through the blinds, I froze. A single handwritten tag was stuck to my front door. A white one, just like the aisle. The message said, "Aisle 8 is open tonight." Underneath, in shaky handwriting, "Come back alone." I didn't sleep. The next morning, I drove 3 towns over and bought groceries somewhere else. When I got home, there was another tag taped to my door. "You left something here." I hadn't left anything at all. But later that night, while putting groceries away, I found something in my pantry that made my skin go cold. A plain white jar, with dark liquid inside. A handwritten tag attached, "This is now for you." I dropped it instantly, but the lid cracked open when it hit the floor. The smell that came out wasn't food. It wasn't mold. It wasn't anything I could describe. It smelled like something old and wrong and rotting in a way that didn't belong in this world. I kicked it into a trash bag, tied it with double knots, and threw it outside. In the morning, the bag was gone. But a new jar was sitting on my porch. Same dark liquid, same tag. "You can't throw it away." I packed a suitcase and left Redfield the same day. I didn't tell Stuart. I didn't say goodbye to anyone. Now I live 3 states away, bigger town, normal grocery stores, normal aisles. But last night, while shopping at a Walmart, something happened that froze me in place. A blank aisle appeared between 2 sections. No label, no number, just a white rectangle, and a single jar sitting in the middle of the floor. A tag attached. "We found you again." The aisle flickered out of sight the moment someone else walked by. But I saw it, and I know one thing with absolute certainty. Aisle 8 doesn't stay in Redfield. It follows you. When I first moved to the quiet neighborhood of Willow Bend, I thought I'd finally found peace. Tree-lined streets, friendly neighbors, perfectly cut grass, and houses that all looked like they belonged in some 1980s family sitcom. Everyone waved, everyone smiled, everyone kept their yards immaculate. A little too immaculate. I rented the house at the end of Dogwood Lane, a small blue house with a messy yard and chipped shutters. It didn't fit the rest of the street at all, but the price was good and the place was bigger than my old apartment. My landlord, Mr. Harper, handed me the keys and said something odd before he left. "Don't worry if you hear the mowers at night. It's just the neighbors keeping things tidy." It took a minute to register. "Mowers at night?" "At 3:33 a.m. sharp," he said, turning away. "Just stay inside. Don't try to talk to them." I laughed, thinking he was joking. He didn't laugh back. The first few days were normal. The neighborhood looked perfect. Pepper trees trimmed evenly, hedges sculpted, lawns so flat they looked ironed. Everyone seemed friendly, but oddly quiet. The kind of quiet where conversations stop when you get too close. The first night it happened, I jolted awake to a loud mechanical roar. It took a moment to orient myself. The clock on my nightstand read 3:33 a.m. The sound grew louder, multiple engines. I walked to the window, thinking maybe someone was mowing early before work. But what I saw made my skin crawl. Every neighbor on the street was mowing their lawn. Not one person, not a couple. Everyone, every single house. They pushed their lawnmowers in perfect sync, straight lines, matching speed, turning at the exact same second like a choreographed routine. No talking, no music, just a synchronized humming filling the night. Their eyes were open but unfocused, their mouths slack, their faces expressionless under the porch lights that flickered unnaturally as they worked. My heart pounded as I watched them march up and down their lawns like sleepwalkers obeying some silent command. I recorded it on my phone, but the video came out warped, distorted audio, frames skipping, people blurry no matter how still I held the camera. After 10 minutes, every mower shut off at the same time, all at once, and every neighbor, in unison, turned their heads toward my house. I jumped back from the window. No one knocked, no one approached. They simply went inside their homes calmly as if nothing had happened. I barely slept. The next morning, I tried to bring it up casually. I saw a woman walking her dog and asked with a nervous laugh, "Busy night of mowing, huh?" She froze mid-step. "My yard needed work," she said flatly. "At 3 in the morning, it needed work." Her eyes stayed on me too long before she dragged her dog down the street. Later, when I got groceries, I asked the clerk if it was a local thing, some weird Willow Bend tradition. The clerk dropped a can and whispered without looking at me, "Don't watch them, and don't ever go outside at 3:33. The next night, I set an alarm for 3:28 just to be prepared. When it rang, I stayed in bed, listening. At exactly 3:33, the humming started again. Dozens of engines, moving in order, following invisible lines. I couldn't help it. Slowly, I crawled to the window and peeked through a tiny gap in the curtain. Same thing. Every neighbor mowing, perfectly synchronized. Except this time, something was different. Someone was in my yard. At the edge of the grass, right near the sidewalk, stood a tall man in overalls holding a manual push mower. He wasn't one of my direct neighbors. I'd never seen him before. His lawnmower wasn't running, and he wasn't moving. He was just staring at my house, not mowing like the others. Just watching. His face was blank, his posture stiff. I ducked away and crawled to the living room. But when I peeked through that window, he was closer, standing near my porch stairs. I moved again, checking the kitchen window. He was at the bottom of my porch, silently, unmoving, watching the house. I froze behind the counter, heart pounding so loud I was sure he could hear it. At exactly 3:43 a.m., all the mowers stopped. The humming died instantly. When I dared to peek again, he was gone, but fresh lines were cut into my yard, perfect lines. I hadn't mowed at all since moving in. Someone had done it for me. The next day, the neighbors acted normal, waves, polite smiles, but something about their eyes felt different now, hollow, too focused, too knowing. On Saturday afternoon, I noticed something new. The lawns were growing fast, too fast. Grass that had been cut the night before was an inch taller already. The hedges looked fuller. The trees seemed to stretch, almost like the neighborhood itself was growing unnaturally. I tried to call my landlord to ask about the mowing traditions, I guess you'd call them, but he didn't answer. Later, I went for a walk and found every neighbor's lawnmower sitting in identical positions, lined up perfectly near their garages. Same brand, same model, same age, same rust spots. It was as if the whole neighborhood ordered their mowers from the same place, or had them delivered at once. At sundown, something else happened. I found a note on my porch, handwritten, neat cursive. "Your yard looks better. We'll finish it tonight." I nearly packed my things right then, but something wouldn't let me leave. A feeling I couldn't explain, like the street itself didn't want me to go. That night, I didn't sleep. At 3:33 a.m., the engines roared again. This time, I didn't go near the window, but I heard footsteps on my porch. Slow, deliberate, someone testing each wooden step. Then the sound of a lawnmower being rolled up against my door. Then silence. I held my breath. Someone whispered through the mail slot, "Come help us." My blood turned to ice. Another whisper followed, this one deeper, "Everyone mows." I stayed completely still. After 10 long minutes, the humming faded. By the time the sun rose, my entire yard was freshly cut. Perfect lines, trimmed hedges, swept walkway, more perfect than human hands could make. I found another note on my porch. "Your turn is coming." I spent the whole day packing, but when I tried to start my car, it wouldn't start. The engine clicked uselessly, like the battery was dead, even though it had been fine the day before. I called a tow company. They said they'd send someone as soon as they could. 3 hours passed, then 4. Finally, as dusk fell, I got a text. "We can't come to Willow Bend after dark." I didn't bother calling back. I spent that night hiding in the bathroom with the lights off. At 3:33 a.m., the humming began again, but this time it was louder, Closer, dozens of mowers right outside my house, then footsteps on my porch, dozens of them. Heavy breathing, whispers. It's your turn. Your yard must stay perfect. Everyone mows. Then I heard the mail slot creak open. An envelope slipped through. I didn't touch it until morning. The envelope had only one thing inside, a folded paper with 6 words. Tonight you push the mower. That was enough for me. As soon as the sun came up, I ran out the door with a backpack and didn't stop until I reached a highway miles away where I flagged down a trucker. I didn't go back for my belongings, my car, nothing. I moved states, changed my phone number, told myself it was over. For a while it was quiet, until last night. I woke up at 3:33 a.m. to a sound I hoped I'd never hear again. A lawnmower humming outside my new apartment window. Slow, steady, deliberate. I checked the time, 3:33. A piece of paper was taped to my window from the outside. 6 words, everyone mows, no matter where. And below it in smaller handwriting, it's still your turn. I used to work the front desk at a tiny roadside motel off Highway 27. Not a chain, not even a 3-star place, just Maple Hollow Lodge, 12 rooms, flickering neon sign, and carpets older than I am. It was the kind of place truckers used for a few hours of sleep and families only stopped at when their car broke down nearby. I took the job because I needed quick cash, and the manager didn't seem to care that I had no hotel experience. The only rule he emphasized was weird. Don't rent out room 6, he said, and don't try to clean it. I laughed, thinking he meant the room just needed repairs. He didn't laugh back, he just repeated it, slower. Don't open room 6, ever. The first few nights were normal. I checked guests in, restocked vending machines, and killed time watching old TV shows on the lobby's tiny wall-mounted TV. The motel was usually quiet after midnight, just the hum of freeway traffic and the buzz of that failing neon sign. Then on my 4th night, something strange happened. At 1:13 a.m., the phone at the front desk rang. Not the lobby phone, the internal line, the phone system used for room-to-room calls. The screen lit up, room 6, front desking. My stomach dropped. No one was checked into room 6. I stared at the phone, unsure what to do. It kept ringing, loud, shrill, like someone was pounding a fist against the receiver. I didn't answer. At 1:16, it stopped. The next morning, I told my manager, expecting him to reassure me or explain some wiring glitch. Instead, he went pale. You didn't answer it, did you? No. Good. He swallowed hard. If it calls again, you let it ring. I asked him what was wrong with the room. He shook his head. You don't want to know. That wasn't an answer, but I didn't push him. Not yet. The next night, room 6 called again. Same time, 1:13 a.m., same insistent ringing. I didn't answer, but I picked up the lobby phone after it stopped and dialed the number manually, just to see. A faint click, then silence, then, very quietly, breathing, slow, wet, right next to the speaker. I hung up immediately. I told myself it was probably feedback or interference, but something about the sound felt wrong. Too real, too close. 2 nights later, things escalated. Around 2 a.m., I saw the light under room 6's door. It was a dim, sickly yellow glow, like a lamp turned on inside. But I checked the log. The room wasn't rented. The key for room 6 was locked in the cabinet behind the desk. No one should have been in there. I walked down the hall slowly, telling myself it was just a bulb glitching. But when I reached the door, I heard something. Something moving around inside. Footsteps. Slow, dragging footsteps, like someone walking in circles. I knocked once, because curiosity overpowered common sense. The footsteps stopped instantly. The light switched off. The door handle twitched. Just once, then nothing. I backed away and practically sprinted to the lobby. The manager came in early that morning. When I told him what I heard, he didn't say a word. He walked straight to room 6, put a chair under the doorknob like he'd practiced it 100 times before, and walked away. Later that day, I overheard 2 housekeepers whispering about something I wasn't meant to hear. We used to clean room 6, until the stain came back, the one shaped like a person. That night, I broke the rule. I tried to clean room 6. I waited until the manager left, grabbed the master key from the cabinet, and walked down the hallway with a flashlight. The air got colder the closer I got. Not AC cold, like basement cold, dead cold. I removed the chair from the door and unlocked it. When I pushed the door open, the smell hit me first, like damp carpet mixed with rot. like something had soaked into the room for years. My flashlight flickered as I stepped inside. Everything was wrong. The walls were stained yellow. The air felt heavy, thick, like breathing inside a closet full of mold. The furniture was crooked, like someone had shoved everything away from the center of the room. And on the carpet, directly in the middle, was a dark stain. Human-shaped, arms slightly spread together, head outline visible. A perfect silhouette of someone lying flat on the floor. I thought maybe it was paint or old blood, but when I crouched closer, it wasn't a stain on the carpet. It was a stain in the carpet, sunken, indented, like the floor beneath had warped around a body that was once there. "Jesus," I whispered. The temperature dropped sharply, enough to make the flashlight flicker harder. Then something moved behind me. Scrape, slide. I spun around so fast I nearly dropped the light. The door was starting to close, on its own. I lunged and grabbed the handle just before it clicked shut. I yanked the door open and bolted down the hallway like a terrified kid running from the basement. When I got back to the front desk, the internal phone started ringing. Room 6. Ringing so aggressively the whole unit vibrated. I didn't answer, but the phone didn't stop. It rang for 15 minutes straight. When I couldn't take it anymore, I ripped the handset off the hook. The ringing continued. I unplugged the phone entirely. The ringing continued, coming from inside the earpiece. I left it ringing. The next morning, I confessed everything to the manager. He didn't yell. He didn't even look angry. Just tired. "Do you know what happened in room 6? I finally asked. He nodded, but it took him a long time to answer. 25 years ago, he said, a man checked in on a stormy night, alone, paid for one night. He never checked out. He died in the room, yes. How? The coroner said heart failure." He paused. "But the staff said they heard him screaming." My skin crawled. "Did he leave behind the stain?" "That's the problem," he whispered. "We cleaned it, replaced the carpet, replaced the flooring, even repainted the walls." His voice shook. "But the stain always comes back, the exact shape, the exact place." I swallowed hard. "So the room is haunted?" He shook his head slowly. "No. Haunted you can clean. Haunted you can bless. Haunted you can fix." He looked at me with exhausted eyes. "This is something that never left." That night, I quit, but I agreed to stay until they found a replacement, because the manager looked desperate. My last shift was supposed to be uneventful. Instead, it was the worst night of my life. At 12:47 a.m., every internal phone started ringing. All 12 rooms, one after another, then all at once. Their lights blinked. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and 6. All 12 phones were ringing in perfect unison. The sound filled the lobby like an alarm. I covered my ears. It didn't help. My vision blurred. The lights dimmed. Then, just as suddenly, all the phones stopped. At the exact same moment, silence. Then one single phone began ringing again. I didn't want to look, but I did. The display said, "Room 6, front desk." The ringing was slow now, almost inviting. My hands shook as I backed away. Then I heard it, a click. Coming from the hallway, the sound of a door unlocking. Room 6 had opened. Something stepped out, not walking, dragging, slow heavy footsteps sliding along the old carpeting toward the lobby. I didn't wait to see what it was. I ran out the front door so fast I nearly slipped on the concrete. I didn't stop running until I reached my car. I left everything in the motel, my jacket, my backpack, my final paycheck. I drove until the sun came up. I haven't been back to Maple Hollow Lodge since. But 2 weeks ago, my new job transferred me to another town. I checked into a motel near my new place because my apartment wouldn't be ready for 2 more days. I went to the front desk to ask about breakfast hours. The clerk smiled politely. On the wall behind him was a key rack. I scanned the tags without thinking. Room 1, Room 2, Room 3, Room 4, Room 5, Room 6. The key looked old, but the metal tag attached to it didn't match the others. It was darker, more worn. It looked exactly like the one at Maple Hollow Lodge. And when I turned to head to my room, I saw something that made my blood run cold. Down the hallway, Room 6's door was cracked open, just a few inches. A thin, dark stain spread from beneath it, shaped like a person. And as I stood there staring, frozen in place, the internal phone behind the desk started ringing. The clerk picked it up and said, "Front desk, hello?" Then confusion spread across his face. He whispered, "How did you get this number?" I didn't wait for him to finish. I don't think room 6 belongs to one motel. I think the room follows people, and it found me again.